Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in Naperville, Illinois. I am Ann Ariano, a member of your Board of Trustees. We are so glad you are here, whether you are present in the sanctuary this morning or watching remotely. It is so good to be together. We welcome you to our church and invite you to get to know us better after the service. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another in our spiritual and religious journeys while holding ourselves in covenant through our shared 7 principles. The mission of DuPage UU Church is to gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, wherever you are in the world, you are welcome here. We have a couple more announcements. The silent online portion of Auction 2023 begins this week at 4 p.m. The live auction is Saturday here at the church with food and drink at 5:30 p.m. and auction bidding at 7 p.m. Childcare is available, but please let us know, like now, in time to secure adequate child care coverage. The deadline for all donation submissions is today. Drop-off times for non-perishable items is also today until noon down in Creeves Hall and on Wednesday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. As you may know, our annual auction is our largest, well, only, non-pledge fundraising event for our operating budget that funds staff, programs, and our building and grounds. Much more than that, though, its function is to offer fun and fabulous goods and services, plus activity and dinner events for adults and families to connect with others in our beloved community. Find all you need to know on the Auction 2023 page, accessible from the top navigation of the church website. And please check out the catalog of items on that website that it will lead you to for the silent and online and for live items. Donors have outdone themselves this year with quite the array of varied and awesome and kind of wild offerings. Check it out. Thank you, donors. Also, at its meeting earlier this month, your Board of Trustees appointed co-chairs for the upcoming capital campaign to retire our loan debt. The board is excited to have Dean Reschke and Kat Gelder, yay, leading the campaign. Your responses and suggestions during the feasibility portion of the campaign exploration helped identify this stellar duo. They are in process of rounding out the campaign leadership team that will work closely with Protapis Associates Consultants to ensure the best possible outcome for the effort to pay off our loans. This effort will free up funds from your generous pledges and other contributions. Instead of going to the bank, it will be available to us for staffing, programming for adults and children, and will help ensure a healthy financial outlook for DuPage UU Church as we embrace our future and bring our vision to life. Look for more information and updates from the Capital Campaign Leadership Team in the coming months. And now, if you are online, we invite you to greet each other through the chat. And if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone who you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning. Thank you.
this chalice today for a second Unitarian Universalist principle. We believe in justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Good morning. I am Caroline Bailey, a member of your Sunday Services Committee. Our opening words are from an unknown source. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and in miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in hymn number 159, This Is My Song.
Please remain standing and join me in the covenant of our church. We come together to affirm our relationship with one another, our shared commitment to our Unitarian Universalist principles, and to our DuPage U Church community. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous in relationship with each other so that we might transform ourselves and the world. Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships we have with each other, our world, and creation. Each week we share our joys and concerns. Today's flowers are given by Carol Manthy's husband, Russ, to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Even when the cares of the world weigh upon us, May we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways that we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds, and with our joys and with all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, please join together in a moment of meditative prayer and silence.
It is time to gather. Our featured hymn today speaks of standing up for something that you feel is right, even though others may not agree with you. My story today and the person that it is about reflects this idea. The title is I Dissent. Ruth Bader Ginsburg Makes Her Mark by Debbie Levy and illustrated by Elizabeth Baddeley. You could say that Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life has been one disagreement after another. Disagreement with creaky old ideas, with unfairness, with inequality. Ruth has disagreed, disapproved, and differed. She has objected, she has resisted, she has dissented. Disagreeable? No. Determined? Yes. In 1940, Little Ruth's neighborhood was vibrant with immigrants, people from Italy, Ireland, England, Poland, and Germany. Jews from Russia, like Ruth's father, Nathan Bader, and people from different cultures with different holidays, foods, and traditions. But in all these families in Brooklyn, New York, and in families everywhere, one thing was the same. Boys were expected to grow up, go out in the world, and do big things. Girls? Girls were expected to find husbands. Ruth's mother disagreed. Celia Amster Bader thought girls should also have the chance to make their mark on the world. So she took Ruth to the library. And on the shelves were stories of girls and women who did big things. Ruth read about Nancy Drew, girl detective. And she discovered Amelia Earhart, daring aviator. And she learned of Athena, goddess of Greek myths. And here were independent girls and women taking charge. Ruth read her way into this world. Around her, the sweet scent of books blended with savory aromas from the Chinese restaurant downstairs. Delicious. A girl could be anything. Sometimes Ruth and her parents took car trips out of the crowded city. And as they drove past a hotel in Pennsylvania, Ruth saw a sign, "No dogs or Jews allowed." This is how it was in those days. Hotels, restaurants, even entire neighborhoods announcing no Jews, no colored, no Mexicans, whites only. Ruth and her family were Jewish. This was prejudice, pure and simple. Now it was Ruth's turn to disagree. She disagreed by never forgetting how it felt to read such words. And she never forgot the sting of prejudice. In elementary school, Ruth was excellent in some classes and less excellent in others. Her favorites were English, history, and gym. In those, she did well. But then there was handwriting. Ruth was left-handed, and back then, teachers told left-handers that they should try to write with their right hands. Ruth's right-handed penmanship was so bad she earned a D on her penmanship test. She cried, and then she protested. Ruth protested by writing with her left hand from that day forward, and it turned out she had quite nice handwriting. Ruth also had a little problem with sewing and cooking. Those were her least favorite classes, but girls had to take them. Boys took shop, where they worked with saws and other tools. Ruth objected. She wanted to take shop. She wanted to handle a saw. She didn't get what she wanted, and it may have been unfair to girls and to boys, but Ruth was learning that sometimes life was like that. Ruth loved music. She especially loved opera, and in music class, she lifted her voice in song. This time it was Ruth's music teacher who objected. Gently. Ruth simply could not carry a tune. The teacher asked Ruth not to sing out loud in the chorus. Ruth kept on singing in the shower and in her dreams, and she continued to adore opera too. By the time Ruth was in high school, friends and teachers knew her as an outstanding student, baton twirler, cello player, and newspaper editor. And as graduation approached, Ruth was chosen to make a speech at the ceremony. But she had been keeping a big secret. Her mother was terribly sick, and the day before graduation, Celia Bader died. And there is no agreeing with this. There is no disagreeing. This simply was. Ruth did not go to her graduation, and she did not give her speech. Still, Ruth knew what her mother wanted, and 3 months later, she left home to attend college. Not many girls went to college in the 1950s, and Ruth made friends, but she also met girls who excluded Jews from their clubs. And she met boys who thought girls should be looking for husbands. And she met Martin Ginsburg. Marty was tall and funny, and Ruth was small and serious. Marty could make her laugh. They fell in love and hatched a plan. After college, they would go to law school, both of them. Lawyers, Ruth had learned, could fight unfairness and prejudice in courts. People thought it was a fine idea for Marty to attend law school. They didn't think Ruth should go. A lady lawyer? People disapproved. Ruth disapproved right back. So did Marty. They got married, they went to law school, and they had a baby, Jane. Ruth's law school class had a total of 9 women and 500 men. She studied mightily and tied for first place in the class, and yet at graduation, no one would hire this brilliant new lawyer. Why not? She was a woman. Men didn't want to work with a woman. She was a mother, and men thought a mother wouldn't pay attention to work. She was Jewish, and many people were still prejudiced. 3 strikes against her. But Ruth was not out. She resisted and persisted. Finally, a judge hired her, and she worked like mad for him. And after that, one law school hired her, and then another, and Ruth became one of the few female law professors in the whole country. And she did it with a new baby at home, James. Ruth had disagreed and worked, her way into being a lawyer and a professor. But around her, other women were excluded from jobs. When they did get jobs, they earned less than men. They were kept out of important roles in government and courts. And to make matters worse, the Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court in the land, approved all of this. As one Supreme Court justice had written years before, the natural and proper timidity and delicacy which belongs to the female sex evidently unfits it for many of the occupations of civil life. In other words, women and girls were too shy and weak to do big things in the world. Another Supreme Court opinion declared, women has always been dependent upon man. Ruth really disagreed with this. So Ruth went to the court to fight for equal treatment of women. The most important cases went to the Supreme Court. And the first time she appeared there, Ruth was so nervous she feared that she might be sick. But standing before the 9 Supreme Court justices, Ruth imagined them as her students. She, Professor Ginsburg, needed to teach these students, who were all men, why a person's choice shouldn't be limited because she was born a girl. Ruth wasn't only fighting for women. When women were excluded from the work world, men were excluded from home life. Why shouldn't a father stay home to care for his children and cook the meals? Why shouldn't his wife run a business? These were fresh ideas in the 1970s. Ruth did not win every case, but she won enough. And with each victory, women and men and girls and boys enjoyed a little bit more equality. Sometimes Ruth and Marty's children received confused looks when they said that their mother argued cases in the Supreme Court and their father made the family's dinners. People found this strange. Ruth, Marty, Jane, and James did not concur. They kept on being the type of family they wanted to be, and dinners at the Ginsburg's home were delicious. Marty was a successful lawyer, but also a marvelous chef who had mastered the art of French cooking. Ruth, her family knew, had mastered the art of burnt pot roast. Ruth became well known as a lawyer, so well known that President Jimmy Carter chose her to be a judge in Washington, D.C. And then Ruth became known as a first-rate judge, and President Bill Clinton asked her to be a justice on the Supreme Court. Along with the 8 other Supreme Court justices, her job would be to decide the most significant case and answer the most difficult legal questions in the United States. Ruth agreed. And in 1993, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg became the first Jewish woman on the nation's highest court. In each case, the Supreme Court considers, after hearing from lawyers who argue for each side, the 9 justices take a vote. The side that gets the most votes wins the case, and the justices who agree write an opinion to explain the court's ruling. When Justice Ginsburg votes with the winning side, she wears a special lace collar over her robe. But many times, when the Supreme Court announces the decision, Justice Ginsburg disagrees. I dissent, she says, and she writes her own opinion explaining why. Plus, she wears a different color just for dissenting. I dissent, Justice Ginsburg said when the court wouldn't help women or African Americans or immigrants who had been treated unfairly at work. I dissent when the court rejected a law meant to protect the right of all citizens to vote, no matter their skin color. I dissent when the court said no to schools that offered African Americans a better chance to go to college. Justice Ginsburg can be very convincing. and in one dissent, she explained why the court was wrong to rule against women workers who were fighting to get paid the same as men. And Congress and the President agreed with her and passed a law to undo the court ruling. Justice Ginsburg has disagreed with most often with the legal views of Justice Antonin Scalia. But they didn't just complain. I dissent. No, I dissent. They shared their conflicting ideas, and each pointed out weaknesses in the other's arguments. And after the opinions were written, the two justices had fun with each other. They didn't let disagreement about law get in the way of a long friendship. They went parasailing in France and riding an elephant in India. Justice Ginsburg was the oldest member of the Supreme Court. Some people had said that she should quit because of her age, and Justice Ginsburg begged to differ. She worked as hard as ever. She exercised in the gym. She never missed a day in court. She attended the opera, gave speeches, and traveled. Many have cheered Justice Ginsburg for her persistence and independence. They've called her a rock star, a queen, a goddess, a hero. Of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg isn't a rock star, a queen, or a goddess, but to many she is a hero. She made change happen, and she changed minds. She cleared a path for people to follow in her footsteps, girls in college, women in law school, and everyone who wanted to be treated without prejudice. Her voice may not carry a tune, but it sings out for equality, and step by step, she has made a difference, one disagreement after another. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Fight for the rights that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." Let's sing to the children.
Giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Your contribution supports the programs and operations of DuPage UU Church. Giving is also how we live our values in the world. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offering team. During October, our special offering will benefit Donka of Wheaton, nominated by Barbara Roos. Donka Incorporated provides people with disabilities with computer training, assistive technology, called AT, and job placement services. Their mission is to empower abilities through technology by teaching individuals with disabilities to use AT. For more information about Donka, please visit their website at https://donka.inc.org. The morning's offering to support the work of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church and of Donka Incorporated is given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude. Our reading today is from the words of Frederick Douglass, who lived 1817 to 1895. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Please stand as you are able, in body or in spirit, and join us in our hymn 119, Once to Every Soul and Nation, and the words will be projected.
To morning. Every hymn in this book has a story that is rooted in our history. Some of the stories are more complex than others, with the historical roots going this way and that and connected to other things, and sometimes it's a real struggle to find out what the story is. But they all have some things in common. Every hymn must be conceived, it must be born, and it must be nurtured, at least for a while, by its creators. The parents are usually a writer and a composer. Usually the two didn't know each other. Most hymns are not the result of a Gilbert and Sullivan or a Rodgers and Hammerstein collaboration, but an after-the-fact pairing that one of the two felt could work. To survive, a hymn needs some kind of universal, almost timeless appeal for its intended audience. It can be topical, but not obviously dated, because generational memory tends to die out before the hymnals wear out. Once to Every Soul and Nation was the adaptation of a Welsh melody written by Thomas John Williams in about 1900, called Ebenezer, which means the rock. I love this hymn. It's in the key of F minor. Vera plays it extremely well. It's got 3 very down lines and one in the middle that gives you a little hope, but not a lot. It sets the tone extremely well. The lines from the hymn that we have, in the 2 verses, are from a poem written by James Russell Lowell, a Unitarian abolitionist, son of a Unitarian minister, one of our own. He wrote it in 1847, and that alone has quite a story. It was rather long. 90 lines long, 5 verses each and 18 verses, written in 19th century metaphorical prose, according to a Greek tradition called political speech. Actually, once you get to know it, you get the meter, and you understand that the first 2 lines rhyme and then the last 3 lines rhyme. It's not hard to read, but when you first read it, you say, oh my gosh, what school assignment is this? I gave everybody a copy on Halloween orange paper, okay? I don't expect you to go around the dinner table like Carol and I did, and she took one verse and I took the next, and we read it to each other. It was actually kind of fun. If you really want to know it, you got a lot of translating to do and figuring out. It takes patience. But it's important to understand that this 2-verse hymn, and I've highlighted the words, there's only 8 lines of the 90 lines that were used in our hymn. It's important to understand that it had a source for the passion that was put into this hymn. In the 53 years between the composition of the words and the invention of the melody, most Americans would have forgotten about the national political climate that had our country in a slow boil just 13 years before the Civil War. Veterans of that war lived until the 1920s, but few would remember the Mexican-American War or the struggle against slavery that culminated in the Emancipation Proclamation of 1861 and the eventual release of all slaves in the U.S. at the end of the Civil War, some earlier than others. So if you want churches to pick up your hymn, in other words, if you want it to sell, Neil, I know you'll understand this. Even the church has to have something that's going to work. Okay, the hymn has to be saleable. It's not a good idea in a hymn to bring up ugly times, ugly themes, a deadlocked Congress, and the plight of millions that all existed a long time ago. America was beyond all that. By 1900, we didn't talk about that stuff. So the hymnist chose to sanitize Lowell's original work for consumption in polite company. We are left with a hymn that leaves out the blood, the misery, and the injustice of slavery that Lowell cried out in his work, The Present Crisis. This poem became the anthem of abolitionism in pre-Civil War America. I've asked all the hymns, all the music to be on the dark side. We've picked rather dark readings about oppression. Steve did a great job picking one about dissent. because I want that to reflect the pre-Civil War period, even though the hymn that we're singing feels kind of uplifting. What produced it was not at all uplifting. This piece is not a pretty piece, but from now on, I hope that when you look at a hymn and you wonder what it's all about, you might have a little more curiosity. The Present Crisis as a poem was popular for a few years immediately after its writing, but its support, like everything else abolitionist, fizzled out after the war. The now newly freed slaves were largely forgotten once the righteous mission of freeing them was taken care of. This actually is a sin upon us. We wanted them free, we got them free, but we all know what happened after the war. I suspect that no one is going to read this now out of print. It really is out of print. You got to dig to find it, except for what's in your hands poem from beginning to end. But I did several times. I researched all the outdated language. I hacked my way through metaphors and held my nose at some of the blatantly crass exploitation of the crucifixion story, which is in here, used to demonize slavery and slaveholders. The poem made me uncomfortable, even angry. It is propaganda. Even though it's for our side, and I do not believe in slavery, I felt it distasteful. Too earnest for my liking, over the top, its passion. Now, a friend of mine, familiar with my task of deciphering the source of my favorite hymn, offered another opinion of Lowell's work, and I'd like to read that. Well, the whole poem seemed overblown to me, too, until I recognized that he is writing about real human bondage in chains and the destruction of people of African descent. Slavery is a horror that doesn't have words. Lowell is trying to describe it anyway, so he reaches for high-level metaphors of sacrifice and truth. He is pulling the argument out of politics, where it has become a debate topic, and that's very interesting because the Senate at the time was 50-50 divided, slave and free states, to which human rights should never be relegated. He is elevating the problem to the proper plane, religious and philosophical consideration, where the right and wrong is clear. I applaud my friend for coming up with this. Person wishes to remain anonymous. I couldn't have said those words, but I strongly agree with him. I then made a connection. Our hymn, with no mention of slavery, not a word about slavery in this hymn, is powerful because great purposeful music was blended with deeply held convictions that served a noble cause. The Present Crisis expresses the pain of real people dealing with ugly realities in what felt like a powerless situation. It was miserable for many people at that time. For Lowell and the nation, what lay ahead was the Mexican-American War. Manifest destiny would be realized with the acquisition of territories encompassing the newly to-be formed states of Texas, California, and the American Southwest. We would buy them from Mexico if we could. We offered $13 million, a lot of money at the time. They refused because we were quibbling about the south border of Texas. We wanted it to be the Rio Grande River. Mexico wanted the border further north so they could keep the river for themselves. We went to war, America won, and we still paid them $15 million. But it wasn't just new territory that had the northern U.S. on edge. Lowell and the abolitionists opposed the Mexican-American War, not just because of manifest destiny, because guess what? It meant the spread of slavery. Half of the country was slave at the time, which meant, guess what? Half of the territories would have to be slave to keep Congress in balance. That's terrible. Okay. This would increase the power of the South, require compromises like the disastrous Missouri Compromise of 1820 to keep the Senate balanced, between the slave states and free. But worst of all, it would put thousands more people into bondage and continue the horrible legacy in which people could own people. There's a verse in here that says this monster of slavery is going to inflict it on our children's children. And that's, if you were a thinker at that time, you realize that's what this is about. We're not just talking now and next year, but we're talking generations if we don't stop slavery. So I ask you, how do you pull that off in a hymn? You don't, because no one will buy it. But what you do is you pull out the resolution that was born out of the struggle, and you condense the 90 lines of the present crisis, kind of like Campbell's condensed tomato soup, into 2 verses of Once to Every Soul and Nation. You give a powerful melody, and you call it a hymn of commitment and action. Now that you know its source, let's sing it again with feeling. There's a change in program. We're going to sing this one. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able to sing hymn number 119 again, Once to Every Soul and Nation.
Please remain seated, but join me in our closing, which is words from Reinhold Niebuhr, 1892 to 1971, just after Frederick Douglass. I will read the lines that are in white, and I would invite everyone to join in unison the sentences that are in yellow. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope. Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Okay, actually it was faith, but that's okay. So if they have problems, the next one is love, so you're okay. All right. All right. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as from our own. Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. We'll say that again. Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. Please rise in body and spirit for our words as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you. So be it.
All righty.